population was less, so they considered they need to do something that will deter people from taking on their life. So according to Section 57 of Act 2960, that the Criminal and Other Offences Act, it talks about attempted suicide. Look, subsection 1 talks about abetment to suicide. When somebody helps somebody to commit suicide, that one is first degree felony. And first degree felony, the punishment is not less than 10 years and can go to life imprisonment or death. What about the person who is committing the suicide, attempting to commit the suicide itself? Subsection 2 of the Act is misdemeanor. Misdemeanor is a minor offense.
It's not good from a Christian perspective for anyone to take his own life because it doesn't belong to him. It's a gift that is given to him, and he has no authority to take life.
Suicide is one of the most serious public health challenges across the globe. Statistics from the World Health Organization reveal that nearly 800,000 people die by suicide in the world each year, which is roughly one death in every 40 seconds. In a research entitled Suicide Worldwide in 2019, the WHO estimated more than 700,000 people perishing, which is averagely 1 in 100 deaths, as a result of suicide. To this end, a new guidance on suicide prevention was issued, and it was this development that prompted WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus to declare we cannot and must not ignore suicide. Ghana, like other countries, has suicide as one of its major public health challenges. On September 10, 2021, the Mental Health Authority of Ghana, in a press release, reported 417 suicide-related deaths recorded from January to June 2021. As part of the WHO's recommendations for the prevention of suicidal intent is the decriminalization of suicide attempts. The criminal codes of some countries and jurisdictions across the world regard suicide as a criminality. The likes of Nigeria, Rwanda, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Pakistan fall within this category. Ghana is no exception. But a remarkable notice about these jurisdictions is the fact that most of them are former British colonies whose corpus of laws take their roots from the British. It is, however, interesting to note that the British had this element of law repealed from its penal codes as far back as 1961. Mention can also be made of countries like South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Singapore, and India as jurisdictions that have also had suicide repealed from their criminal codes. These developments beg an obvious question: why countries like Ghana still criminalize suicide? Section 57, subsection 2 of the Act 29 of the Criminal Code of Ghana 1960 criminalizes suicide. Pursuant to this section, a person who abets the commission of suicide commits a first-degree felony whether or not the suicide is actually committed, and a person who commits suicide is held guilty of a misdemeanor. It is worth mentioning that over the years, attempts have been made to decriminalize this section of the Act. For instance, in the year 2012, a group of lecturers sent a petition to Parliament advocating its repeal. Again, the Mental Health Authority and other well-meaning groups have on several occasions called for this development. Nonetheless, the situation remains the same. The criminalization and penalization of attempted suicide in Ghana raised a number of questions. What is the social, moral, or legal basis for its retention? To what extent has this law fared in deterring the commission and the abetment of the commission of suicide? How does the call for decriminalization help in the reduction of the incidents? Esinamdra is a mental health advocate who, in the course of her battling of bipolar disorder, harbored suicidal ideations.
My name is Esinamdra and I have lived experience with bipolar disorder. I was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 2015. At the time I was a third-year student in the University of Ghana. But before, in level 200, that was my second year, I started having symptoms of depression. Bipolar disorder is a two-in-one sickness made up of mania and depression. And when depression comes, suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideations. So there were times that I'll be in my room, or it could happen anywhere, and I was just tired of living. I just wanted to die. I was tired of living with the regrets of a broken heart, and I just wanted to leave this world. The pain was so much, the emotional pain was so much, and I just thought suicide is the best way to end it. It could be a sign or symptom of a mental health condition, or it could just be an ideation, a thought that someone may have of wanting to end their life, harm themselves, or just wanting to end it, or a way of exiting from the pain of this world or whatever they are going through.
According to her suicidal intents were born out of the strain she had experienced throughout her journey. But how do we look at this from a mental health perspective? Catherine believes that the attempt to commit suicide is purely a cry for help. She calls for the institution of systems to cater for people who go through these hard times.
As a psychologist, I think that suicide is a cry for help. I personally don't think that anyone wants to kill themselves, because there are countless things in life that people would want to do. However, some people face certain challenges and they think that they are at their wits' end. It's either they don't have access to resources, or they have tried certain resources and they think that it's not been helpful, or they think that when they talk to people, they wouldn't get people who understand them, or they wouldn't get people who are willing to help them. And so for people like that, the should I say the easiest thing to do, or the best way out for them, is to commit suicide, is to put an end to all the pain and everything that they are going through. I think that for somebody to get to the point of actually going ahead with the attempt to commit suicide, the person is at their lowest breaking points, especially for suicides that are related to mental health issues or other societal pressures. Now, to talk about the criminalization of suicide, even though murder is a crime, somebody committing suicide, I don't think the person is committing a crime. I think it's a cry for help. I'm not a legal mind, but I think that our constitution gives room for people who commit certain acts when they are not in the right frame of mind. That is why sometimes people plead insanity. They do certain things when they were not themselves, or they were not in the right state of mind. Let me put it that way. They were not in the right state of mind when they committed whatever crime it is. And if it can be proven that they were actually not in the right frame of mind, they are given the needed help. So why is it that when it comes to suicide, the first thing that we want to do is to criminalize it? I think that when it comes to suicide, the first thing that you should do is to get them to a mental health facility, to get them to a place where they have access to resources, they have access to professionals, they have access to information to help them overcome whatever challenge it is that they were going through.
The two dominant religions in Ghana, Christianity and Islam believe that suicide is never an alternative, as it is tantamount to ripping oneself of the gift of life given to man by God. At the Our Lady of Assumption Catholic Church at Nua Chimota, I spoke to the Reverend Father Charles Macharia on suicide and its criminalization in Ghana. He alluded to the fact that suicidal contemplations were as a result of the overwhelming nature of life's burdens.
First of all, we should know at the basic that God is the author of life. So life belongs to God, doesn't belong to us. And therefore, He is the only one who has the right to give and to take. So He gives the life and He takes the life. No one has the right to take life as a foundation of this topic on suicide. It's not good from a Christian perspective for anyone to take his own life because it doesn't belong to him. It's a gift that is given to him and he has no authority to take life. So at the Christian perspective, it is a sin to take one's life. Now, as we say, there people are pushed to take their lives by circumstances sometimes that reach beyond their reasoning, and when it goes beyond their reasoning, they don't even have the time sometimes to think the consequences of their actions or even the moral perspective of their action, and that's why they reach to that point of committing suicide. And so on that ground, we will say at a certain point it will be better if that person can seek advice, if possible to seek advice. And if anyone can see from a distance, you see this person is thinking of going very far, you can approach the person, because sometimes those people, they don't seek for assistance, they want to solve their own problem by eliminating their life. But on the Christian perspective, it is a sin to commit suicide.
But he thinks that its criminalization exists only to deter people from contemplating it.
Maybe it's only on the side of deterrence in order to deter people, because when you make something a criminal, that means it's punishable. It's in order, the punishment most of the time is to deter people, to tell people if you do this, you are going to get this as a consequence, which is a punishment. So maybe on that ground they can have that argument. I don't have that argument.
He does not believe in criminalizing suicide. He believes in assisting these victims with the needed support.
My point will be that it will not be much of necessity to make it a criminal offense, but rather, if possible, to reach out to that person and help that person to overcome the challenges he could be undergoing. Depression, frustration, and things that go beyond the person, that makes the person feel like taking his life. It's like the person has reached the end. Yes, it's like for him or her, she has exhausted all the options and all the solutions, and the only one that is remaining is to take his life. From a Christian perspective and as a clergy, I will go for the option of accompanying them, to journey with them, to help them, because they might still commit suicide. They might still look for other solutions. When you are punishing the person because of attempting to take his life, you are even adding a problem on top of another. Yeah, somebody who wanted to punish himself, now you yourself, you want to punish him, so you are adding on top punishment on self-inflicted punishment. And in that case, you are even adding a problem on another. And that person may be forced, even be pushed to go to commit suicide even more than before.
I spoke to a legal practitioner who enlightened me on the legalities associated with the subject.
When you read moral and social philosophy, you come across a lot of philosophical perspectives that allow you to understand the law better. And so if you ask me of my perspective on suicide as a lawyer, I will tell you that it is an offense that was inherited, or that has been inherited from the laws of England. And if you read history, you come across the fact that in the olden times, suicide was seen as a religious crime, or it was seen as something that the law does not allow because of religious reasons. And I'll point you to two reasons. The first one is that it was seen as a double offense. Thus, they construed it to be a spiritual sin. A spiritual sin in the sense that we see that it is a sole prerogative of God to take life and to give life. And so where a person takes his own life, it is deemed to be an evasion of the prerogative of God. You are trying to take God's work, and so that is a spiritual sin. Again, it was seen as a sin against the king, or let me say it was an offense against the king because of what we call the social contract. You know, when you read the contractualists like Stuart Mill and someone like Hobbes, you come across the idea that the state was formed to serve as the main actor who will, let me say, make sure that the excesses of human actions do not affect others or are not done. And so you realize that the state is the only institution that is mandated to punish. So where the state is functioning, the state has an interest in the preservation of the lives of its subjects or citizens. And so if you are taking your own life, it was deemed to be a crime against the king, that you are taking that thing which the king has an interest, which is your life, and it is not allowed.
But what accounts for the different penalties given people who attempt the commission and people who abet in the commission of suicide?
Now, in Ghana, we have two offenses under Section 57 of Act 29, which is the Criminal Offences Act 1960. The first one is attempted suicide, which is a misdemeanor, which means that when you are found guilty, you can go to prison for a maximum of 3 years. And then we have abetment of suicide, which talks about people who help others to commit suicide. And that is a first-degree felony. It is seen as a serious crime. It's just like you helping a person to commit murder. And so the reason behind, or the policy rationale behind making the abetment of suicide grave, or more grave, or what people say gravier than the attempted suicide, is that most of the people who attempt suicide are considered as people who are not necessarily persons who are in control of their minds. And so there are some people who have mental psychosis, people who are disturbed, people who are depressed, who can go through that under normal circumstances they will not take their lives. And so the law does not want to punish people such that people lose their lives forever. And so you come to realize that even in practice, most of these people who attempt suicide are taken to the psychiatric homes and not necessarily jailed. Yes, they are not. But people are asking that if this is the policy rationale behind it, why not decriminalize it? For me as a lawyer, I will tell you that there is always a reason for an offense. One, on a lighter note, someone will say that because there is an offense called attempted suicide, people know that there are two things involved. Either you succeed in a suicide, or when you fail, you'll be punished. And so that will deter people from even attempting the suicide in the first place, because you either die or suffer. Yes, there are some other considerations, like I said, health-wise, that I personally will appeal to government to look into that, especially when it comes to the taking care of people who have mental disabilities or mental challenges. And I think that is the reason for not making attempted suicide that grave. But when it comes to abetment, it is serving as a deterrent. We have different forms of punishment. Some are supposed to reform, some are supposed to deter people from indulging in the same act, and some are for retributive purposes, to punish people for what they have done. And so where a person is mentally challenged, where a person out of his free volition wants to commit suicide, and you help that person, it is just like you helping a person to commit suicide. And that, to me, is graver than the person who has elected to go and commit suicide.
But the man representing one of the core institutions of criminality in the country thinks differently. Johnson Edusai Opoku is a class instructor at the National Police Training School in Accra. So I'm here with Detective Inspector Edusai Opoku Johnson, who is a class instructor at the National Police Training School here in Ghana.
It's depression that is making people commit suicide. They have many problems, but they don't have answers to the problems. So the only answer to their problem is to take on their own life, and that's it. Let's give some small examples. A lady is having marital problems and a whole lot of passion from the family members how to give birth. She can't stand it, the trauma. Take their life. Young boys and girls of this want to live a flashy life. At the same time, they don't have work. You end up borrowing, excessive borrowing, and they don't have any means to pay for the borrowing that they've made. What do? To take on their lives. So I would say suicide, to me, I will repeat it, is a cause of depression. That people have problems, they don't have solution to their problems. As they resort to suicide to take out their life. When they were making the law, way back in 1960, at that time the population was less, so they considered they need to do something that will deter people from taking on their life. So according to Section 57 of Act 1960, that the Criminal Offences and Other Offences Act, it talks about attempted suicide. Look, subsection 1 talks about abetment to suicide. When somebody helps somebody to commit suicide, that one is first degree felony. And first degree felony, the punishment is not less than 10 years and can go to life imprisonment or death. What about the person who is committing the suicide, attempting to commit the suicide itself? Per section 2, subsection 2 of the Act, it's misdemeanor. Misdemeanor is a minor offense, and the 6 months imprisonment, it can be less and not more than 3 years. So why the person who is taking his life, you are giving it minor, but somebody who helps somebody to do it, you are giving it higher? To me, in general, we shouldn't have criminalized suicide, but rather when we identify anybody who is trying to commit suicide, that person needs to be sat down, talked to. That person needs psychological counseling. If there's a solution to their problems, we solve the problem. To me, we shouldn't criminalize suicide, but rather we should identify them, listen to them, offer them the help they need, let them tell us their problems. If there's a solution, we give the solution to them and it will minimize. If you are criminalizing it, I want to kill myself, and you will arrest me, and then, thank God, you take me there, I'll go and die there. I'll go and starve, I will not eat because me myself, I want to die. So I will starve and I'll die. It's not the solution. To me, the solution to suicide is to identify those people and help them or offer them the need that they need to solve their problem.
The lawyer, however, asserts that the criminalization of suicide is a step in the right direction.
And so I fully support the fact that when you abet suicide or attempted suicide, you are punished more than the person who attempts it. The way forward in Ghana, I think, is to take a look at our facilities. I do not buy into the idea that it should be decriminalized because it has its pros and cons. It should be there, but we should necessarily look at the procedures in prosecuting such cases, and then also how we are able to treat people with mental disabilities, mental challenges, especially where they try to take their lives. I would not agree or buy the idea that it has to be decriminalized.
Nonetheless, he calls for systems to cater for people and circumstances that trigger suicidal attempts.
When we have good facilities that will take care of these people, I think it is a better option than to merely decriminalize it. And I think it will not, the decriminalization of the offense will not necessarily reduce attempt that people have when it comes to suicide, but it is likely to soar it. And so I think it should be maintained, but facilities are supposed to be provided for those who attempt these things based on mental challenges.
My name is Fidelia Sewa Ankuma. I am not a mental health nor a security expert. Neither am I an authority on legal matters. I am just an ordinary citizen of Ghana who share in the perspective that suicide is a subject which, when looked at differently rather than its criminalization, will see a major reduction in its prevalence. Given the incidence of suicide all across the world and its concomitant consequences, I will join the Mental Health Authority of Ghana in asserting that is why the object of decriminalizing suicide from our statutes is of essence. Simply put, these individuals have cried for help. We failed them. They took no action to kill themselves and equally failed to kill themselves. Must we punish them when they had cried for help? Definitely not. They do not deserve punishment, but simply need psychological support. Punishment worsens their plight and prevents them from being useful members of their community. Just my take. What do you think? This is an appeal to all the institutions that matter as far as the criminalization of suicide in Ghana is concerned. Are we going to toe the line of our colonial master and the other jurisdictions who have done same? And how soon? Or are we just bent on maintaining the status quo and subjecting these victims to a double jeopardy of failed attempts and prosecution, just like being done by others? It is September 2021, and I cannot tell what tomorrow holds. I can only say, we live to see.